So I assume everybody can see my screen.
Yep.
Great. Fantastic. So we have a couple people here now, so we can just get started. Great. So nice to meet everybody. My name is Simon Fedorovsky. I am a partner of Sphere Consulting Limited. We are a Toronto-based accounting firm. So I know that these webinars have been happening for quite a few weeks now, and a lot of the discussion that's already happened so far has been around operations, sales, marketing, leads, a lot of which is, ABR's brain and power and knowledge. So today we're going to talk about a couple of other things that are, I guess, somewhat interesting to most people, which is the finance, right? So we've already discussed CRM. So today we'll talk a little bit about the Zoho Books platform. We'll talk about Zoho Expense, and we will also talk about Zoho Inventory, okay? And how these applications all work together in conjunction as part of the finance suites, okay? So under Books, we'll cover user roles, tags and custom fields. We'll do automation, a little bit of a quick overview of how that looks. We'll do project tracking, and we'll also do some settings with expense, policies and approvals. And with inventory, a big hit is the warehousing and any integrational options that we have over there. Okay, so let's get started. Does anybody have any questions so far? Cool. So who are we? Which is a pretty typical question to ask when you see an accountant talking on the screen. We're a small boutique accounting firm based out of Toronto that was established in 2016. I am a co-founder and the CEO of the firm. And our main goal and priority is to make accounting really easy and simple. Accounting is typically such a treacherous task when it comes to working with finances and numbers. Nobody wants to care about those things and deal with the headaches. So the main purpose of the accounting firm when we started it was to become the modernized approach to pretty much any accounting solution or problem that you have. Okay, so it's taking things that are typically paper-based and making them cloud-based and more digitized, or whether or not it's system consulting. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So our services really include full cycle accounting. We do a lot of Canadian tax compliance, and the full cycle accounting is pretty much for any English-speaking country that follows somewhat the guidelines that we can actually perform the bookkeeping in. So that would be US, Canada, UK, and Australia. And we do a lot of ERP consultations and implementations. And that really has to do with a lot of the system work that we'll discuss during this call. And we do some reporting, virtual CFO, and consulting. Okay, so a lot of consolidation, working with big firms and companies in the US do US GAAP consolidation, so things like that. A little bit more high level. Okay, so our clients, we have probably a little over 40 industries that we dabble in, and the clients by range is anywhere from 100,000 to 300 million. It really depends. We have some companies that have 1 employee to 10, and we have companies that have 1,500 to 2,000 employees. Truly depends on what you need. Okay, and we have monthly clients under management. These are companies that we have an engagement with to do the day-to-day accounting, whether that's monthly reconciliations or doing the entire AP process for a company. That's about 68 companies in the US, Canada, and internationally. So these are the regions that we service for most of the services, but we have limitations to some extent from a liability perspective with regards to tax or sometimes bookkeeping as well. Okay. So we've been around for about 6 years now, about to start our 7th, and we've built a pretty good client base. And, we have a lot of incredible experiences in the last 6 years, especially dealing with such a new market like COVID, where people had to switch things up and really rely on accountants. But our main prioritization is really modernized approach, right? So cloud access, reporting, support packages, consulting. We're very systems oriented, right? So not a lot of accounting firms are systems oriented. They usually hate systems. That's because most people they're a bunch of nerds that just like numbers. So we know cost accounting, we know systems, we know automation. We also know operations, how to run things properly from a finance perspective. My background has been cost accounting, and it's been really around a lot of the virtual CFO stuff. I've been an interim CFO to quite a few companies in the past, And that's really where my experience has really come up. And our main priority is really we invest in ourselves. So we've used the last 6 years to really develop our internal process to really streamline it so that we can actually do the same for others and not just make blanket statements, right? So if you have a mess internally, how can you advise others to do things properly? And number 4, everybody that we hire on the team is an accounting pro. So unlike most firms that do the migration process and can do consultations from a finance ERP perspective, everybody on our team is an accountant. That really helps bring things together and streamline things and not have projects where you don't know what you're doing. And that is exactly why we work in such close contact with ABR, because they really rely on us to do the finance work because they're the masters with everything else, essentially. Okay. Any questions so far? Let's see. I have a couple of questions. So, okay. So there were quite a few questions, but I'll answer Kate's question. Do you have experience working with any franchisors? Yes, we do. Yeah, we have one pretty big restaurant franchise that we worked with in Toronto. We have in the US a couple of fairly large franchises that we worked with as well. It's a bit of a unique industry, that's for sure. But we do have quite a few clients that we've dealt with, especially on the consulting basis. The other question John asked, John, I'll respond to that a little bit later. That's a really, really good question about time zones.
I have a question here too.
Sure.
Can you explain the virtual CFO position and how that works?
Sure. So virtual CFO is truly a la carte option, because when you say virtual CFO, it truly depends on what extent of consulting or oversight you need from a CFO perspective. Depends on how big the company is, depends on what's the scope. Is it manufacturing? Is it production? Is it just a SaaS company, right? Every single piece of the puzzle is really different. When we talk about virtual CFOs, it's really about the engagement and what is required of us. But we typically pair you up with somebody who's very, very high experience in accounting, high level knowledge of internal processes, being able to manage certain procedures and really get the company to the next level. Mm-hmm. So a lot of that does revolve around like reporting and getting things streamlined from that perspective, and doing month-end close and managing a team potentially. So it really depends on the scope. So every single engagement is a puzzle on its own. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Hopefully that answered the question. Okay. So let's go back 1 second to our services. And I really want to focus on the ERP consulting and implementation side, because this is really where the bulk of our knowledge truly lies. And the reason for that is I've personally used pretty much every software that's under the sun. So Sphere and everybody that's employed by Sphere has really dabbled in pretty much any software that's out there, including the ones that are legacy softwares like BlueLink and Account Edge, which some of you might hear about, but they're a little bit older and starting to fade. Yeah.
I just want to say too that it's really cool that you guys work with Zoho Books, because I would say probably 90% of the clients that we have tell us we can't move to Zoho Books because our accountant doesn't know how to use it and they don't want to learn it, basically. So it's really, really cool that you guys do that, and that you also are familiar with the automations and can work with those, because that's not something that you find a lot.
Yeah, the problem with our industry is people stick to their own, to their old ways. Yeah. And they don't want to change, right? Because you always have to keep yourself on your toes. Like a lion is always in a hunting mode, right? For us, one of the important things is we don't want to become irrelevant in an industry that's so technologically advanced nowadays, where you have companies like NetSuite and SAP that are really pushing cloud solutions, very high level techniques from like consolidation perspective, or even just a reporting perspective, or any automation that has to do with manufacturing. So Zoho Books is one of those software that's kind of in the middle, that it gives you the ability to do this, but a lot of accountants get scared. So it's really important for us to stay on top of it. So, we have, monthly meetings with new innovation calls. So we have the partners talk about little new companies that come up, any new software that gets developed, things like Brex, which is a company that's recently been really up and up. Like any of these little ones, that are coming up and really trying to make an impact, we try to really assess every one of them one at a time. So it's a good point.
By the way, what Carol said, it's very interesting, and I see it also a lot, that you have people that, let's say, will work with QuickBooks. And with QuickBooks, they need to copy paste from their CRM. It's not only Zoho, also other CRMs. They need to copy paste information from Zoho to QuickBooks. They have another resource that costs $60,000 a year just to do those copy paste. And usually there are screw ups in this process, and they will not move from QuickBooks to Zoho Books, which is integrated, just because they don't want to piss off the bookkeeper.
Yeah.
And that's something I just can't cope with. Is the bookkeeper your main interest or your business? Exactly. I don't get it.
Yeah. Your bookkeeper should be the person that saves you time and streamlines everything so that you can catch mistakes, make better business decisions, right? Not the person slowing you down.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So a lot of people get scared. They either, it's a family friend or somebody they've been with for a long time. Especially in this economy now, you have to really think for yourself and just make the right decisions as a business unit.
Of course.
So we'll talk a little bit more about Zoho Books right now and in general. So the first, if there anybody who has any other questions, we can.
There is one question.
Sure.
It's are you a little Zoho partner? I think they ask if you are a Zoho partner or something like that.
Yeah. So we are Zoho certified. So we can. Yeah, I know. So finally, it's been a long discussion with Zoho So we are Zoho Finance Suite certified. We've taken the course and we are a partner officially as of recent. So yes, we are. Yeah. So we can officially say that we're in good terms. They love us. Let's just put it this way.
I just want to say too that a lot of people are Zoho partners, but they're not certified in Zoho. So that's like a really cool thing. And that's quite an accomplishment for your company. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. It's again, going back to the development piece, it's just like we want to build a team that actually knows what they're doing instead of just being in a reactive approach constantly.
Absolutely.
Okay. So let's talk about Zoho Books. And we'll just go through a couple of different pieces. So first thing, let's look at the dashboard. For those of you who have dabbled in Zoho Books, it's something that you can take a look at. We have on the left-hand side, we just have a couple of the modules that are pretty straightforward. Most of the software engineers have developed a similar type of dashboard, a similar type of layout. Actually, interestingly enough, QuickBooks Online just released a very convoluted and excessive dashboard upgrade, which actually got a lot of backlash. So moral of the story is keep things simple and it works the best. And then on the top right, you have a whole bunch of settings options that we can talk about a little bit later, where you can really dive in and really structure your company how you want it, right? So the whole piece of this Zoho Books, it's first of all fairly user-friendly. It's not as pretty as other software like QuickBooks or anything else that's out there that's like Xero, where you have a little bit more color. But this does a lot more from the perspective of actual, productivity, getting things done, getting things connected. The opportunity here is much higher than most of the software that you see out there in the market right now. Unless you're going into SAP or NetSuite and you want to spend the kind of money that's for that perspective. Now, don't get me wrong, the value in SAP and NetSuite is astronomical, but it comes with its price, obviously. So going back into settings under user roles, you have a lot of capabilities to structure. This is one of my favorite aspects of Zoho Books. When you compare it to everything that's in the same category, this is truly one of the beautiful pluses of Zoho Books. And in here, you have the ability to modify and customize different roles to your liking. So that comes pretty much straight out of the box if you have the right subscription. And you can really take this thing to the next level. So you can limit anything from customers to vendors, projects, to specific reports. So you can even go and say that they can only view the P&L, or they can view and download the P&L, or they can view and export the P&L into Excel. You have every stage of access is modified, like you can modify it to whatever you need. Okay. So as you can see, everything is very tabled, so it's nice to follow. And it's just easy to understand. So you can really customize the roles that you need within your company so that if you have Zoho 1 and you're working with all the other applications, you can actually channel the proper access to the finance piece that's Zoho Books, finance piece to Zoho Expense, right? Because every one of them works independently, which is the beautiful piece. You don't have Zoho Books that has inventory in it, which would complicate the setup. You have inventory on the side. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So aside from the user preferences, the users themselves are fully customizable as well. So you can have different custom fields, different areas that you can then report on or connect any of your automation to. And that's extremely useful when you're talking about any ERP or any accounting software specifically. And that leads me to the next thing, right? So tags and custom fields. So when we do tags, this is actually a humongous plus when you compare this to pretty much any software that's out there right now, aside from SAP and NetSuite, or let's say Microsoft Dynamics. Reporting tags are a way to segment your reporting and break it out by specific structures. Okay. Mm-hmm. So when you're talking about reporting tags, you can have a main tag level. So a tag name, which would be just like a classification of sorts. So QuickBooks, for example, has classes, and you can have multiple classes under one class heading, right? But in here, you have them all split out. So every transaction can have many classes and many subclasses. So you can allocate your expenses by a division, by a country, and by an employee. So one line can have 3 different attributes linked to it. And what that means is down the road, you can actually split up your P&L by each specific segmentation of your finances. So when we typically look at finances as a whole, your P&L is extremely vertical unless you split it out by a reporting period. With this, you can split it out by specific segments of the business. So you can look specifically at a department, how much they spent in OpEx. You can look at specific countries, how much they brought in business-wise. Right? You can look at employee expenditure that can be automated. Right? So these are employee codes, for example. A lot of larger companies tend to use this kind of code. We have the first letter of the first name, last name, and the country that you're part of. So you can do employee segmentation as well.
Yeah.
And the crazy part, sorry, go ahead.
That's super helpful. We have been using that for our developers, and that way we can figure out what developers are performing and actually bringing in money the most.
That's right. That's right. And this is all tying to our model in a sense where we take the large company approach and we bring it into smaller companies so that they can do proper month-end close, proper reporting, right? You want the system to run for you. It's garbage in equals to garbage out.
Yeah.
If you put terrible data in there and you put no effort into your finances, you're going to have a very reactive approach when things get tough. Let's put it this way. So tags are a really nice way to break out that reporting structure. And you can actually run budgets within Zoho based on tags. So you can allocate employee-specific budgets, for example, or project-specific budgets if you are working within tags. So that's an extremely, extremely incredible tool that can be used. And you're not really limited to the number of tags within a tag name, but you need to, I would always simplify the tag names. So I would say let's have maximum 4 to 5, right? So that would be like your country, department, employee. Some companies want to do line of work, right? So if you're a company that sells a product but also services it, those are 2 separate divisions within the industry. So if you run it on a basic P&L and it's all vertical, it's all going to be squished together. You won't be able to identify your EBITDA for that specific division of work. So with tags, you can separate it out and code it and start to automate it so that you can run, let's say, your division for servicing versus your division for actual sales. Really, really useful tool. This is extremely underused in Zoho. I would say 90% of our clients don't use this to full capacity. It's a bit of an interesting number to say, but I would say 1 in 10 understands how incredible this is.
Wow.
Okay. Now, the next thing is any field customizations within any of the modules. So not only can Zoho receive data extremely easy. So you have the functionality of CSV uploads that are incredible. So you can pretty much upload anything that has a master data. So customers, invoices, sales orders, everything can be done with a CSV, including timesheets, every single thing. It's extremely helpful, because with QuickBooks, you're kind of running through a module, right? Where you have to pick and choose out of a set list of things that you want to upload. And it's not upload and update, because you can also do that here. So you can update your master data with a CSV. So really, really useful to also know that these custom fields are, the options are pretty incredible. Now you can have, I think, 100 and somewhat custom fields. Let me see if it shows it somewhere here. Yeah, right there. So you can add about 103 custom fields into your just the estimate module within Zoho Books. Now, keep in mind what a custom field does for you is enable you to do automated reporting. It enables you to be able to run automations in general, right? So any code that triggers anything can be run from these custom fields. And you're also able to use this data later on if you want to report in analytics, pull it back to CRM if you need to. So like the options are pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
And if we look at how to add it, this is an example of a dropdown, for example, right? You can make them mandatory. You can make them show in the PDFs. Now, one thing to consider, and this is just a caveat that I always like to say, when you're dealing with Zoho Books and any finance module or program, whether it's NetSuite, whether it's SAP, your finances are the most sensitive piece of data that you have. So limiting and understanding what kind of automation you put into play is really important, because you also don't want to over automate. Over automation is probably a syndrome at some point to some clients, because especially when it comes to finances, there's a little bit of risk.
Yeah.
When you get into audits, when you get into bigger companies, it's all about control, limiting exposure to things going wrong. And with finances, it's really the sky's the limit, because you can really screw something up. One wrong automation can create crazy amounts of journal entries or invoices. So you do need to be careful with that. And that goes across all the platforms that are available out there. So just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, we always recommend people to be very careful with automating finance, and even something like creating an invoice automatically.
Mm-hmm.
Create it, but look it over and then send it. Don't just send things out without looking at it.
It's so crazy, because one little piece of, like, if you do one thing incorrectly,
Mm-hmm.
it's got exponential problems. So let's just take, for example, an automation that takes an invoice and creates a recurring invoice from it, like a template.
Yeah.
Now, if you do that incorrectly, your recurring invoice will set up another recurring invoice the next month. So the first month you got one recurring invoice and one regular.
Mm-hmm.
The second month you got 2, then you got 4, then you got 8. And if you, let's just say you go 8 months without understanding what's going on, and you have a finance department that's separate, they're not going to be able to understand really what's going on, or where the problem lies, or how to fix it.
Yeah.
Right? So,
and that's just the finance level, like, not to mention what the client's going to think about you when that happens, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You're getting all those emails. They're getting all these invoices. I mean, good for you for bumping up your sales, but it's not, it's not the real approach. Cooking the books this way is not it. So, so really incredible. And you can do this kind of work with every single module. I just show you like the sales side of it, but you can do it with the purchases, bills. You can customize fields in your projects area, the users, right? So you can add custom areas to your user setup. It's pretty incredible. Items, services, everything. Okay. Now we'll talk a little bit about automation.
I have one question here real quick.
Sure.
Someone asked, if I have multiple companies that are separate entities, can I have them all tied to one Zoho account? Like,
so if you have
multiple accounts.
So if you have, can you repeat that again?
Yeah. So they have multiple companies that are different entities. So can they have like multiple books accounts for one CRM?
Absolutely. Yeah. Now you can only have a live integration with CRM that's out of the box, a two-way integration for one company. And again, probably for any reason that you probably can understand, doing a two-way integration from many companies to one source is a very risky thing to do. But you can create code, and I believe your team, Carol, has done this quite a few times, right? Where they've done CRM to many different books and
We
pushing data
actually
into
do have
books.
that. We have, I was just letting you answer the question, but we have Canadian and US.
Yeah. Okay. So there you go. So that's exactly it. And so you can have as many books accounts as you want linked under the same email, and you can just toggle on the side, on the right hand side between the organizations. So with a click of a button, you can go from one to another.
The way we have it set up too is we have a field that basically asks which books account do you want to use, US or Canada, because we have a branch in the US and a branch in Canada. And depending on which one you choose on that deal, once you click the button after you choose that selection, it will push the data to the proper books account.
That's right. Yeah. And that kind of leads me to this piece, which is the automation, right? And this part is really interesting because the sky's the limit again, but the automation sections within the settings where you can write code and really code anything your heart desires, whether it's sending a love letter or sending an invoice. This is your one-stop shop to making everything happen. So yeah, the automation piece here is to an extent a little bit more limited than CRM because Zoho Books is a little bit more restricted, but that's done on purpose, obviously, not with there's no malice, right? It's just because accounting is just a little bit more stringent for that side of things. So custom code, you can create it, and then you got the developer space to really tie out every connection that you have and make sure that all your webhooks run properly and all the other aspects of the automation flows well. Okay. You have automated payments, which is a typical one. So you can connect a whole bunch of different payment processors to Zoho Books. And there's a list of a couple of them here. Stripe is, I think, their preferred one. You can also do PayPal. You can do recurring bills with Stripe and Authorize.net and with PayPal now. So you can set up a recurring invoice to get billed, charged, and sent to the client on some sort of schedule, whether that's monthly, weekly, whatever that might be. So, yeah.
I have a question about this that just came in. Does Zoho charge to process payments through their system?
Okay, good question. So Zoho does not charge anything directly. So Zoho is simply the connector. So they have the data from their accounting software. Stripe is the only fee that you will pay. There's no upcharge to any Stripe fees or any of the processing fees, whether it's through Zoho, whether it's through manual, it's the same fee. So you can connect your Stripe account to your Zoho Books account, and then you'll pay the same fee. Zoho doesn't take any bit of it away from you. Yeah, there's no intermediary fee for merchant management. Yeah, which is great. You can also do ACH in the US. It's pretty successful. That's also an option as well with Stripe and Authorize.net.
Yeah, the ACH is great because you're paying a lot less for ACH than you are for credit or debit.
That's right. Okay. And a really big hit is also the project management within Books. So this is located in here in the main area. It's just a module on its own. And you can create projects, code them, assign different billing methods to it. So you can have fixed projects. You can have based it on hours, based it on a budget. There's a ton of different options there. And this is what it would look like when you set up the project. So you can have specific tracking for your users, for your timesheets, for how much time somebody spends on something. All the billing comes from here for specific projects if it's a timesheet project. So your team can automatically bill through extensions. So there's a Chrome extension where they can log in time. And then you go ahead and do the billing here through the system. Now with a couple of clicks of a button, you collect all the data and you can spit it out into the invoice however you choose. So you can break it out by specific lines. You can do one flat line for all the hours. So really, really nice tool. Great for reporting down the road as well. And great for management.
This is super helpful. I know we use this a lot in our company because we basically run on fixed price projects, right? Because we want people to be informed of the cost up front. So we're able to basically say, what did we estimate? What did we invest into this project? And were we actually profitable? And it's super easy to do. Like, I'm really bad at all the accounting stuff. So for me to be able to just log in and at one quick glance know, like, was I profitable or not? Do we need to alter the way we estimate projects, or maybe it, by developer, how fast or slow they work, those kinds of things. I can really pinpoint it. So that's great.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. Any questions so far about books?
Let me check. We had the one about the processing payment. No, we've answered them all. I've just been interrupting you throughout. So.
Okay. No problem. Okay. All right. Okay, Zoho Expense. This one's a fun one because of the pricing structure. I think that's really, really interesting to note that where, in the industry, you have SAP, which has Concur, you have Expensify. They all do the same thing. They all process things the same way, but they all cost very different. And their contributors to their structures is really how much can they integrate with and which programs can they work with, and are the integrations out of the box, or do you have to pay for connectors? So with Zoho Expense, I do find that it's a great selling tool because the values there. I know a company that has, I think they have like 2,000 employees that run entirely on Zoho Expense, but they don't use Zoho Books, right? So they just use Zoho Expense as is, and they connect to a separate program. I think they're on Microsoft Dynamics. So the options here are pretty great from that perspective. So the dashboard for Zoho Expense, it looks similar to Zoho Books from the perspective of everything is on the left. So all your modules are here. I'm sitting right now in admin, so I can look at all the reports, look at all the advances, look at all the corporate cards. And you have the setting piece at the top right, as well as all this other beautiful information that pops up in the middle. So pending reports, things that need to be approved, spend summaries, all that stuff. Okay, so going into settings, you have a lot of different things that you can do here with Zoho Expense. And the setting gear icon is here or at the top right. And within these, you have approvals. So you can do like automating approval flows. So if an expense report has expenses under a specific amount, they could just get automatically approved. You can also do, if an expense report is over a specific amount, it goes to somebody else. If a GL is used, it goes to another person. It's pretty incredible what you can do here with the automation. Okay, so approvals, you can do workflow rules. So that's also something similar where you can get something to flag, something can pop up, an email can be automated to somewhere else. So automation, again, is a really key player in both of these systems and in inventory, because you can't do that with anything like, QuickBooks doesn't have workflow rules. You can't do that with QuickBooks. You can only do that with SAP or NetSuite or Dynamics.
I'm not sure that a lot of people know what workflow rules are. So
okay.
I want to dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, it's a good idea. So with a workflow, it's essentially, the best way to explain it is there's a company that's called If This Then That.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way to explain it is it's an algorithm that just follows a set list of instructions to decide on an action. Okay, so it would essentially be, if something happens based on something else, do this.
Yeah.
So a good example is, yeah, go ahead.
An automation that has a trigger. So something's going to trigger.
That's right. Yeah. So a good example would be if an invoice has a custom drop-down field that says email and the invoice status is in draft, go ahead and mark it as sent and send it to the customer. Mm-hmm. So 3 steps, sometimes there's 4, depending on how complex you want to take it, but you can build it and have different layers of testing requirements to make the workflow work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's the best way to explain it, I think. Carol, I don't know if you have a couple of extra pointers on there, but it's pretty clear.
No, I think that was great. Basically, I just typically say something with a trigger, but because there's automations that take place by pushing a button. There's some based on a schedule, but this one, something is going to trigger it and then it will happen.
Got it. Yeah. Okay, I have a question. Jeff Woolley, does Zoho Expense have a mobile app? And can you upload pictures of your receipts? Yes. So that's a very typical question. Zoho Expense works exactly like Concur or Expensify. You have a nice app. You can take pictures. And actually with Zoho Expense, you have auto scan, which is unlimited, versus QuickBooks. Zoho Books has a bit of a limitation there. So with Zoho Expense, you can take your phone, snap photos of the receipts. It automatically starts to classify them, whether it's based on your recent categorization, or maybe it's based on the information that it already has in the database. So it'll be able to pick up on the total vendor, sometimes pick the category for you and preset it. And then it'll be able to also match it against a corporate card if that's an option that you have. So if you have a feed for a corporate card, it'll be able to match it and sync it automatically. So yes, the mobile app is great.
Isn't there also like a wallet in there? So like if you have a company card, you can upload it there and use it, something like that?
I believe so. Yeah. And, with all these wallets and things like that, you do have to tread carefully, obviously, when you're doing with when it's under a corporate plan specifically. But yeah, I think that's an option that's fairly recent, right?
It is. Yeah. I think I saw it when I was training a client on it. Basically, a manager can upload their corporate card, and just like with the approvals, as long as it's under a certain amount, then the employees can use it for expenses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. So integrations, it can integrate to a whole bunch of accounting softwares. So you can go ahead and do direct integrations with a couple of them. I believe it's QuickBooks, QuickBooks Desktop. There's, gotta put it down somewhere. Yeah, Zero, Sage, Dynamics, NetSuite, and also SAP. I think it's B1 that can automatically integrate with those. So that's great because then you can do expense reporting from Zoho Expense and push it into another system based on what the other system requires.
It's QuickBooks Desktop, not QuickBooks Online?
Both.
That's really surprising. Okay.
Yeah, the desktop has come out with a couple of new input webhooks that they wanted to try out. So some of the inventory systems are starting to work with desktop, and it's just easier for them to start to do that because it is a legacy software, but they've pivoted their pricing in the last year. So most of enterprise that's on desktop is now billable on a subscription. So they're trying to push everybody to subscription, whether you're online or desktop.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay, and then you can create policies. Now, policies are really, really cool. So we'll dive into that shortly. But with policies, you really have the option to do anything you want within your scope of the company internal policies, right? Whether that's a per diem, whether that's a spending limit, description that you have to put if you spend over a specific amount. So let's go ahead and dive into policies and approvals. It's a great way to segue. So under policies, you have a whole bunch of settings that you can pick from. You have your regular policy names, and you can upload a PDF copy of the policy if you want so that people can actually take a look at it. You can have an admin person that's there to manage it. But within categories and category limits, you can actually set how much a person can spend on an expense for it to get flagged. Now, obviously, this would be a bit of a challenge when you have corporate cards, but when it's reimbursable expenses, then you can actually implement this fairly well and be able to block certain expenses from being submitted. Okay. And also require receipts up to a certain amount and all that stuff. So, and then you have rules. So you can have a policy rule that's created. So if somebody is assigned to a policy, then they can actually have a specific daily limit for an expense, right? So if they spend over a specific amount, you can have a warning action, or you can block them for submitting the expense report. So let's just say that, Bob spent XYZ on his expense reports. If Bob spent $5 over his monthly limit, maybe it's a warning. But if Bob spent 20 over, it's a block, right? So setting these rules is really cool because then you can, the sky's the limit here. All right. Any questions about Zoho Expense?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's see. Is there a way to allow EAs to help prepare reports?
Yes. That's a good question. So in Zoho Expense, under settings for specific user settings, you can actually have a delegate. And a delegate is essentially somebody who's able to go into your account and take care of your expense reporting. So that could be, if it's a bigger organization, we typically see the accounting department is a delegate to some employees, or that could be an EA, for example, that takes care of all the expense reporting. So the manager would just go ahead and spend, and then the EA would go in and finalize the expense reports, gather the receipts, and put all the commentary in and submit. So yes, you can have delegates, and that's easy to operate.
Can you elaborate on what an EA is for anyone that doesn't know?
Like an executive assistant.
Okay.
Yeah. So executive assistants, office managers, anybody who's working to help out the team, accounting and finance, if they're working on something, then they can delegate and they can take care of other people's expense reports if they want to, right? So I always have this as with bigger organizations, it's a check mark. Right off the bat, when you have expense reporting set up, the accounting department is a delegate to the respective teams so that they can help them out in case we need to rush through month-end close and there are issues and somebody's on vacation or they can't answer or they're stuck, right? So it's an easy way to clean things up.
That makes sense. There is one more question, but I think you answered it already. Is the integration for Zoho Expense limited to Zoho Books, which we kind of elaborated on that a little bit already?
No, it's not limited. You have a list of programs that you can use to integrate right away. Yeah. And it's out of the box. Yeah.
Awesome. Yep. That's it for now.
All righty. So now we're going to go on to our wonderful and incredible Zoho inventory. And this is one of my favorite applications actually that Zoho's created because they're putting a ton of energy into it recently, especially. So we'll talk a little bit about the dashboard again, just to showcase what it looks like. But inventory, just to put into perspective, is a very finicky module. Like with any software that you go into, inventory has to be done properly. It's either half-assed, pardon my French, or it's done all the way through. So with QuickBooks, for example, your inventory is kind of a joke unless you have something like SOS inventory or other plugins that can control your inventory and manage it. But even then, because it's a separate third-party software, you run into like integrational issues, whether it's transactions not fully flowing through, your subledger doesn't align, which could be a complicated word. So it's sometimes a very painful process, inventory, especially when you're handling specific physical inventory. We're not just talking about services and goods, right? So those are two separate things, by the way. Let's make that clear from the beginning. You have services and goods, which are items. Now you can have items that are inventory tracked as well. So those are two separate things. Services and goods are handled out of Zoho Books. They're easy to flow. They're easy to work with. They're not complicated. So those are nice and easy to kind of configure. With inventory, it gets a little bit more complicated because of how complex the inventory systems is, right? The inventory system is. So when we look at inventory in particular, again, same thing. We have the dashboard that has all the modules on the left. And you have the settings on the top right. Okay. And you have like a nice overview of your items, low stock quantities, like little sales order snapshot. So it's extremely useful to see this right when you log in. And inventory also has a mobile application, in case anybody was wondering. And it operates with your phone. You can actually do scanning with it if you ever want to. So these are like a little bit more high level from the perspective of inventory, but it's an incredibly gifted program that operates really, really well on its own. Okay. So one of the cool things that I wanted to talk about, because inventory can get so complicated, is warehouses. Warehousing is a really great way to split out your inventory and be able to track it by location. Because if you have it all under one umbrella, it's hard to know where you have all your products, where the value lies, where is the inventory least moving from, right? So warehousing is really important. So one of the things that Zoho did really well is create the ability to add quite a few warehouses, as many as you want pretty much. And you have to pay for them, I think, after a certain point. But if you have Zoho One, I think it's free to set up quite a few of them in the beginning. And you can set up user restrictions by warehouse. So if you have a team that works under one warehouse, you can restrict them to only see that warehouse and what's in it. So going back to that user setup capability, it's phenomenal from that perspective as well in inventory, because you can take it one step further and limit the access within one entity, which is really cool.
Yeah.
I know also from one of the projects that we did together that when people, for example, they take inventory to their trucks in the morning, they can have the trucks as warehouses. So basically they allocate from the main warehouse, they allocate inventory to the truck, they go distribute whatever they have, and at the end of the day, they dump back the rest of it. So you always know the correct amount of inventory across all the different warehouses.
That's right. And that feeds into the whole ecosystem of information. So you can have all your sales orders and picking lists feed into a specific warehouse. Now that warehouse, if it's based on a salesperson that's taking the truck, can be that salesperson's car. So then you could see and preload the day of in the morning, how many units does each person need based on their actual trucking requirements or based on their actual warehousing requirements. So you could say Bob needs X number of one product and Y number of another product because of these sales orders and picking slips that are available and mapped to that specific unit. So yeah, it's like an interim warehouse option is also really useful here. Yeah.
So sales and purchase orders will update not just inventory, but the warehouses?
That's correct. Yeah. So well, when you pick a, when we look at Zoho Books, for example, and you're creating a sales order, there's no warehouse there because you're not really dealing with inventory. Your warehouse is your HQ. It's one umbrella, right?
Okay.
And you're just breaking it out by items that are just services that you're selling.
Mm-hmm.
When you're dealing with inventory, the items have to be mapped to a specific item code that keeps track of how much you have on hand. But how much you have on hand really relies on warehouses. So in most inventory setups that are simplified, you have one warehouse, so you don't really need to pick it. But if you have multiple warehouses, then you can actually pick and choose where you want to deplete.
Okay.
Yeah. So it restricts you. Yeah. Okay. And the whole idea with warehousing is obviously that you want to create a really good workflow and a good balance of inventory tracking where you know where everything is and you're able to fulfill anything that you have to without getting things incorrect. The last thing you want to do is have, okay, we know we have a hoodie here. You go to the location in the warehouse and you don't have a hoodie because it's depleted in another location, right? The point is you are supposed to be in line with the system and make sure that everything is on the same page. Okay. And with integrations with Zoho Inventory, your options are pretty widespread. So you have a lot of different integrations that you can bring in that are natural, that are out of the box. So you can have Aftership, you can have UPS, USPS, and these will be able to print your labels and get stuff set up right away. So you can have UPS connected to Zoho Inventory, and when a shipment is ready to go, you create the label right from Zoho Inventory. So you don't have to go to UPS. You create the label from there. You get the pricing estimate from there, and then you can run automations on that. So it's really useful when you do this. Or you can go with Easy Ship, where you can shop around for the best rates. And you can connect a whole bunch of different stores. A lot of people go with Shopify. A lot of people connect with Zoho Books or QuickBooks. So you can do QuickBooks Online, okay? But again, going back to that point I mentioned about having two different softwares running between each other, if there's ever breakage between them, you are going to run into issues at some point. And subledger issues, which is inventory, ARAP, those are complicated to fix. So you need to be very careful about how you approach these things. Okay. So I think in general, inventory is just a great tool because you have a whole lot of different pieces. You can even connect your sales and marketing, your EDI, which is all your, SPS commerce, like all your different tools that you can use to be able to track things better and have different documents being generated. So it's just a very well-rounded system. Yeah. Okay.
Someone asked, is there a way to track batches and not just individual items?
Yes. So with Zoho Inventory, you have the capability to track batches based off of items that are coming in. So every single time that you receive a bill for product or you receive a PO, you can automatically link a specific batch to it and track it all through the entire process. So the whole point of inventory is life cycles of inventory. So understanding if one unit comes in, how does it end up going out? That's really what inventory is, right?
Right.
1 unit in, 1 unit out. 10 units in, what happens with the 10 units after? So with batches, you're able to channel those 10 units into different segments, kind of like a highway, right? So you could say this batch of product went to this customer and understand if, God forbid, you have any issues, then you can go backwards and start to figure out and tackle internally how to approach the situation. Now, going back to batches and adding a little bit of another layer of complexity, you can also have serial numbers. So if you're getting technology in through the door, you can actually enter all your serial codes in here and be able to sell to people directly specific serial numbers. So a person can say, well, I'm having trouble with this computer that I bought from you. You can automatically look, okay, let me know what the serial number is. You punch it in, you could see the entire life cycle of that serial number. whether or not that customer bought that specific item, right? It's all connected through.
Mm-hmm.
So to answer that batch method question, that's really you have a couple of different options that you can choose there. Okay. Any other questions that you have with inventory?
Yeah, someone said, is there anything concerning with Zoho Finance, and are there any limitations that they need to know about?
So every single software has its drawbacks. One of the things that with Zoho that a lot of people are talking about is one, you do have some limitations. One of the things that I personally don't like is that you have one free accountant user that you have to add and ask Zoho to add to get it activated for free.
Mm-hmm.
QuickBooks has 2 accounting firms that you can create and add to your roster. So it's a little bit of a, you're promoting a finance suite that doesn't have, it's not as easy to add your accountant in there for free, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's possible, but you can only add one accountant. So that's one little piece. Another one is obviously it's not as beautiful as QuickBooks, but the capabilities are much, much more important. So for me, it's not a drawback. And when it comes to just in general, from operation speaking, the only drawback that I can possibly think of is with inventory for any company that does manufacturing. That's truly the only full-blown drawback that I can see with the entire system. Everything else is possible because it's so open-ended. But with inventory, manufacturing is such a specific division within inventory that any company that needs to produce and have good cost accounting, because there's a recipe or a bill of material, so you can't really do those things like a BOM or any cost accounting that has to do with manufacturing has to go through Dynamics, SAP, or NetSuite.
Yeah.
But that's a very small percentage of companies that need that.
Yeah. And just like a CRM, you're never going to find something that's 100%, right? So just by being 90%, it's already much better than all of its competitors.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, the greatest part that I see right now is even in the last quite a few years that we've been using Zoho Books and their finance suites, they've put work and time into doing this and trying to make it better every single year. The amount of updates that they populate is so rapid, and every time they're on the ball with all these things. With QuickBooks, it's like pulling nails out of, like, it's every single update that it's I have a couple of people high up in QuickBooks and Intuit that we have discussions with. We're one of the firms in Toronto that were first to work with Dext or Receipt Bank, if anybody hears or understands those companies. Like, we were, I think, the first company in Canada that implemented Dext. It used to be called Receipt Bank. As an accounting firm. So, these things like QuickBooks has certain upgrades and sometimes they're hit or miss. And it's just unfortunate that they're not as interactive, whereas Zoho is reaching out to accountants, really trying to get to understand what the industry needs, right?
Yeah.
So they understand that they need to fix the accountant access. That's on their list. They're even trying to build a fixed asset module that they were just talking about in Zoholics, which is incredible, right? So fixed assets is a very complicated system as well to think about.
Right.
So yeah, you're right. No system is perfect. That's kind of the takeaway here. But you have to adapt and create your own kind of rules and automations to make it work.
Yeah.
So that's it. Thank you very much.
Can you repeat the whole thing over again?
Done. Okay, let's go back. No problem. Please hold.
All right.
Yeah. Is there anybody else? Does anybody else have any questions? Anything that they want to bring up?
I do not see anything coming through at the moment.
I had one question from John about broadcast emails, but I think that's more of a CRM question rather than a finance question. So, broadcasting emails in other people's time zones, that's not really much of a finance piece, let's put it that way, because you can automate some things there to be able to do that, but that can get complicated.
Let me phone a friend. Leo.
That's
right. In general, all those broadcasts will be using Zoho campaigns if you have more than few hundred emails that you want to send. And if it's less than few hundred, I would use the CRM. It all the questions is what you're trying to do. That's the main thing.
Perfect.
Once
Jordan just asked, Oh, sorry.
Okay, go away, please.
Jordan said, I may have missed it, but has inventory added multiple locations for a product and wave picking?
Yes. So you with inventory, you can have warehouses which will be able to track the location-based quantities and also be able to restrict users based on that. So you can direct your picking to a specific warehouse or location, right? Because warehouse is a generic term. You can have warehouses which is a section in the building, right? If you want to section it off and be able to restrict it. So for example, a lot of controlled substance companies like alcohol, tobacco, all those other companies, they sometimes have warehouses internally within the same warehouse that's just, not for sale, right? NFS. So there are different ways that you can segment the warehousing in general. But yes, the capabilities are pretty good for inventory. Hope I answered that question. Okay.
I think so.
Good. It was a pleasure.
All right.
It was a lot of fun
Absolutely.
getting to do this finally. I've been looking forward to it for quite some time.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
as
everybody.
Always, you're awesome.
Simon. And for all my American people, happy Thanksgiving.
Yes.
Thanks for taking time out of the football game.
I keep forgetting. That's right. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Happy Thanksgiving.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.